Fragging is the long and storied tradition of enlisted men killing their own overzealous officers. While the tradition is old, the term itself was coined during the Vietnam War when the weapon of choice was a fragmentation grenade, as the evidence they left was generally ambiguous. These days, fragging refers to any killing of an officer, but the statistics from Vietnam only counted explosives. There were several hundred murders with firearms in Vietnam as well, but most of these involved enlisted men killing each other. My grandfather in the PT boats said the Navy had their own technique for dealing with overzealous officers that typically left even less evidence. With the troops in Vietnam reluctant to risk their lives in what was perceived as a lost war, fragging was seen by some enlisted men as the most effective way to discourage their superiors from showing enthusiasm for combat. Near the end of the war, officers were rotated out on a 6-month basis, so the enlisted men never knew what to expect next. Fragging incidents usually occurred when the men suspected some new lieutenant was going to use their lives to win himself a medal. The stereotypical fragging victim was an aggressive career officer. Most recording fragging incidences occurred in support units rather than frontline combat units, but it's alleged that a great many fragging incidents occurred in combat, but because they would be indistinguishable from combat injuries, we're never going to know. Sometimes an overzealous officer would receive a mock fragging, having their tent targeted with tear gas as a warning to change their behavior or face a different type of grenade. According to George Lepper, there were multiple recorded incidents of units taking up collections in order to put bounties on the heads of particular officers. Statistics on fragging were not kept prior to 1969. From 1969 to 1972, there were 900 incidences of fragging, with 99 fatalities. Nearly all of the victims were officers or non-commissioned officers. Even as the troop withdrawal began, the fragging incidences doubled from 1969 to 71, before finally tailing off in 1972. By the end of the war, some 450 officers had been killed in fragging attacks, with the U.S. military reporting that another 1,400 had died under mysterious circumstances. The U.S. Army attempted to restrict non-combat soldiers' access to explosives, and the Army in Vietnam temporarily stopped issuing hand grenades to all of its soldiers in May of 1971. During this moratorium, they searched soldiers' private quarters and confiscated everything down to individual knives, but the incidences of fragging did not reduce at all. Only 10 U.S. military fraggers were ever convicted from Vietnam, receiving sentences ranging from 10 months to 40 years, with them serving an average of 9 years. Fear of fragging often kept officers from interfering with drug use and other disciplinary issues. The officers also tended to travel armed even behind their own lines, and would sometimes take to changing their sleeping quarters nightly. There were multiple reported occasions of officers having to negotiate with their own men before undertaking a dangerous patrol, and lengthy fragging investigations often impeded Army operations in theater. The frequency of fragging has dropped off considerably since the end of the draft in 1973. Wikipedia has an interesting list of notable incidents going back as far as 1704, but I'm going to highlight 2 of them. The first is from Vietnam. In 1969, after the absurd casualties taken at Hamburger Hill, an underground GI newspaper put a $10,000 bounty on Colonel Weldon Honeycutt, resulting in multiple unsuccessful attempts on his life. And in 2022, Russian conscripts of the 37th Motor Rifle Brigade ran Colonel Yuri Medvedev over with a tank after losing more than half their number during the Battle of Makarev.